can honestly say I've had single ayahuasca ceremonies that gave me more healing and awakening than those 25 years of other spiritual practice that I did. It's that much more powerful. So for me, the plant spirit work was the magic key for me. And it's the plant herself that taught me. And that's how it's traditionally done. The shaman, their job is to create the container, to make sure you're ready for the plant to work with you. And the shaman will step in and do what they have to if you're having a struggle and you're not getting through there yourself. But the vast majority of the healing and awakening work for me, and I understand for everyone who does this kind of work, is the plant spirit itself is doing it. The ayahuasca, I like to describe her, yes, she's a beverage you drink, but that's just the physical part. Multidimensionally, she is a vast, amazing spirit being that goes all the way up to absolute divine unity. And there's nowhere she can't take me. There's nothing she cannot access.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing, and another amazing day in paradise here at the Way 126 experience. I want to welcome to the podcast Benjamin Bernstein, a AstroShaman. Wow, what an incredible definition of many things intersecting. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you, San. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's always great to have these conversations and enlighten people, whatever it may be. Just a brief word, a moment that creates an awareness that brings people back to returning to who they really are. So I would love you to share with the audience a little bit about yourself leading up to this point.
Okay. Well, I'll start with just what I do these days, and then I'll tell you how it got up to there. I do a lot of different things. I have a number of individual services I offer to people. I do astrology readings and with Western astrology. I'm a shamanic healer, and I'm a life coach. And I also have a new offering called the VIP Day that kind of pulls all that together in one intensive day of experience. I also host a membership called Awakening Plus. I have hundreds of members in there, and this is a membership online only, Zoom events and archive stuff, where people can significantly accelerate their healing and awakening and thriving. So, and we're now putting in some law of attraction stuff on top of everything else. So, have run that for several years, and the members report that they get a lot of benefit from that. So that's a lot of what I currently do. I should probably mention I have a book that is a #1 Amazon bestseller as well. The title kind of tells you what it's about. It's a 15-word title, so I'll take a breath. It's called Instant Divine Assistance, Your Complete Guide to Fast and Easy Spiritual Awakening, Healing, and More. And in a nutshell, many years ago in an ayahuasca ceremony, I got this download where you can just speak to your higher self, use 7 or 8 words, and then literally passively receive your awakening, passively receive your healing. It takes all that ego effort out of the equation and delegates to your higher self the things it can do for you better than your ego can do for itself. So that a lot of that kind of thinking is in the membership and my individual work with clients as well. I host 2 different podcasts. One is an astrology podcast I've been doing since 2005. It's called This Week in Astrology. It's won a number of awards. And more recently, I have a podcast called Awaken, Heal, and Thrive. I put each of these podcasts out twice a month, and you can find them anywhere you get podcasts. And I do other stuff too, but that's a relatively brief synopsis of my current activities. Do you want me to go into how I got to getting to where I am in the first place?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. All right. I'll give you the really condensed version of this. And if you want to hear more about any particulars, here's the super condensed version. I was born and raised in Norman, Oklahoma. I was raised in Oklahoma by New York Jews, and was there until the age of 41. At which point, I'd been working sales jobs for almost 20 years. At that point, I thought, you know what, I really want to be a singer-songwriter. And the urge just got so strong I couldn't ignore it. So at this point, I'm sitting pretty financially. I'm making $80,000 a year, company car, benefits, material, I'm doing great, but my soul is shriveling up inside because I don't feel like I'm aligned with my life purpose. So my partner and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina in 2001, where I've lived ever since, to follow my dream of being a singer-songwriter. And I pursued that with everything I could. And creatively, I think I did pretty well, but financially it was a disaster. I just lost money hand over fist year after year until finally I had to realize, okay, that ain't going to work. But one thing I noticed, and the moral of the story I'll just give you right here, is when you follow your passion the best you know how and give it everything you have, and at the same time you stay open to inner guidance and where the flow of synchronicity takes you, you go places more amazing than you could have imagined. So I'm at an open mic. I meet a guy named Kelly Lee Phipps, who becomes my best friend, just happens to be a professional astrologer. And even though I was married to a professional astrologer in my 20s, had no interest in astrology at that point, but now I'm on fire with it. I can't learn it fast enough. In 2 years of study, he says, okay, hang out your shingle. You're ready to be a professional astrologer. And at that point, I realized the music isn't working. I leave that part behind and I go full on into being a professional astrologer. So I do that for a few years and think, wow, this looks amazing. What a great way to live. And then someone introduces me to plant spirit work. I go to a San Pedro ceremony. I do a few of those and I learn about ayahuasca and I start doing ayahuasca. I've now done over 300 plant spirit ceremonies over nearly 20 years. It's a lifestyle for me now. And I discover, oh my gosh, the revelations, the awakenings, the healings I get with this plant spirit work are just off the charts amazing. It's so good for me. And so then the medicine I'm working with calls me to be a shaman, and there's a little extra story about how at first I wanted from ego to be a shaman and then gave it up and then got called to do it, which is a whole different thing. So after doing lots of ceremonies and bit by bit, the ayahuasca and the San Pedro, they clean me up, they raise my conscience, they teach me internally how to do all this. Eventually I hang out my shingle as a professional shaman, and I had that on too. Then I do that. So now I'm an astrologer and a shamanic healer. That's why I changed the name of my business to AstroShaman. And but then it doesn't stop there. A few years later, my clients started asking me, I need a life coach. Can you do that for me? I said, I don't know. Let me learn how to be a life coach. And I read up on that until the book started repeating themselves. Wait, I see how this works. It wasn't actually that different than what I was doing with clients anyway. So now I'm a life coach as well. And in the midst of all this, I'm so loving the transformations and healings and awakenings I get from ayahuasca. I start doing little gatherings of my own, not serving ayahuasca, but just doing shamanic kind of things where people are having strong experiences of getting cleaned up energetically and having more states of consciousness pop in. And this eventually migrates online and, goes through several iterations. The current iteration is called Awakening Plus, the name of my membership. And now it's gone from just a little project I had to a full-on multi-level. It's not a multi-level thing, but it is a very strong. It's got several major courses. It's got an archive now close to 700 archived events. We do about 15 Zoom events a month, all for a super low monthly membership fee. And now I have hundreds of people in here where I'm helping them accelerate their healing and awakening without even having to leave home. No one's ingesting any psychoactive substances, but the energy is very powerful. And I've done so much work with ayahuasca. She is so integrated into my being now. There's literally no separating us. Can't even imagine what Benjamin would be like without this integrated ayahuasca consciousness mixed in. So there's a lot of power in what I'm holding now and helping people with. And it just keeps growing. I just recently, a few weeks ago, I got lit up with the idea of doing more law of attraction work. I'm about to launch, as we speak, a mastermind group that will both be personal support and law of attraction work. I'm about to start a law of attraction class with an Awakening Plus, adding another element to the mix. So what I love about this lifestyle is it just keeps growing and expanding. I'm 64 years old. I feel like I'm having the most amazing decade of my life so far. And I just love the path I'm on of awakening and healing, of constantly increasing my capacity to serve, increasing the joy of my life. Now, there's challenges on the way, of course, but I've also learned those challenges are simply the universe drawing my attention to this block that's keeping me from being even more awake. And when I am able to skillfully face whatever the challenge is and clear it or transmute it, then that rewards me with yet another level of awakening. So that's it in a nutshell, Sean. Any questions?
Wow. Woo! That's quite something. It's kind of like this. It seems really interesting, the intersection of astronomy, shamanism, and life coaching, sort of like integrating all these facets of a much greater awareness of all things, and then being able to translate them and transmute them into an individual seeker's journey, a Gnostic journey of self-realization. What an incredible unfolding of a profound experience that you're on right now, my dear friend.
Oh, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing. The shamanic stuff. I want to sort of like speak to you more on this, as I've had a few shamans on over a couple of hundred podcasts that I've done, and it's an interesting variable within Taoism. We're very clear on our alchemical processes. The internal alchemy is very, very potent, and probably, I'm a fanboy. Yes, I'm biased. I'm a Taoist priest, and I've been teaching this stuff over 30 years. Yeah, okay. I might be a little bit biased, but still, I have yet to find the alchemical processes that could top a Taoist inner working. Now, within the shamanic processes, it from my own experience and understanding from interviewing many shaman, it has a very similar sort of like esoteric, mystical sort of path that you can go on. Within Taoism, we go into magic, we go into our relationship with the universe, understanding how that works, and then transmuting that into what some physicists would call a multidimensional reality, accessing all states at once, the present moment. How does that integrate for you, or how did you come to that realization? Was it a specific type of like lineage that you were gravitated to, or did you find a teacher, or was it, as you, from your own admission, she spoke to you? Was that directly from the plant medicine that transmuted into the shamanistic practices, or how was it? And then what was the entry level?
Well, I mean, it's been sort of creeping in my whole life, this deeper awakening process. I mean, I followed, just to give a little more backfill, at the age of 17, I had an out-of-body experience and got interested in spirituality, spent 20 years at a meditation school in Oklahoma, did the best I could to learn how to do internal processes there in the inner worlds. Then spent 5 years being a Vipassana Buddhist, just sitting and being with things. And then I discovered the plant spirits, the San Pedro and the ayahuasca. And that's when it really went to warp speed. Everything from there comparative was like a meandering stroll. So for me, the magic key was the ayahuasca and the San Pedro, and to some lesser degree, magic mushrooms. They, I can honestly say I've had single ayahuasca ceremonies that gave me more healing and awakening than those 25 years of other spiritual practice that I did. It's that much more powerful. So for me, the plant spirit work was the magic key for me. And it's the plant herself that taught me. And that's how it's traditionally done. The shaman, their job is to create the container, to make sure you're ready for the plant to work with you. And the shaman will step in and do what they have to if you're having a struggle and you're not getting through there yourself. But the vast majority of the healing and awakening work for me, and I understand for everyone who does this kind of work, is the plant spirit itself is doing it. The ayahuasca, I like to describe her. Yes, she's a beverage you drink, but that's just the physical part. Multidimensionally, she is a vast, amazing spirit being that goes all the way up to absolute divine unity. And there's nowhere she can't take me. There's nothing she cannot access. And the ayahuasca path for me is understanding, okay, Benjamin is, just a little tiny smidgen compared to the vastness of her consciousness. I'm talking about my human ego. Okay. The human part of me is trivial compared to the consciousness of ayahuasca. So what Benjamin has learned to do is relax and recognize his place in the scheme. He's the tiniest tip of the iceberg, and compared to his own divinity, his higher self, et cetera. And ultimately, ayahuasca is me. There's nothing I'm not. There's nothing any of us is not. We're all oneness ultimately. And I think divinity entertains itself by, coming out into individuated forms, because what else is there to do but have unique individual experiences? But I'm more and more understanding and experiencing I am the oneness. I am all of it. And my own path there has been by, lots of work with the plant spirits, because for me, going into ceremony, relaxing, letting, like I say, letting the medicine have its way with me. If I have a really intense, challenging experience, if my body's shaking and vibrating, if I'm vomiting, if I'm shitting fire, whatever I'm having to do to clear that next level of heavy energy, I am willing to do that without resistance now. And know that, as unpleasant as it may be to have to go through that for a while, I know that it's going to take me open to the next level of my awakening. I'll tell a little anecdote around that, if it's okay. Back in 2012, I had my abiding awakening. Prior to that, I had done some ayahuasca ceremonies, and by the end of the ceremony, I was in the awakened state. I knew experientially I am divinity, conscious, and Benjamin, and we're the same thing. And then I would go to sleep, wake up the next morning, and it would be gone. And that was really frustrating. So I bargained with ayahuasca. It was not a ceremony, but it's okay. Here's what I'll do. I'll go to Peru. I'll do this double dieta. A dieta is normally you're there for usually 12 days or so, 2 weeks. You do 4 or 5 ceremonies in the jungle and you come home. I said, okay, I've done a couple of those. Didn't quite get there. I'm going to do a double. I'm going to stay in the jungle for a month, do 10 ceremonies with a shaman I've been working with, ayahuasca. You give me an awakening that sticks, and then I don't have to drink you anymore. That was the deal I was making at the time. And sure enough, in the 8th ceremony, I got the abiding awakening that was still there the next day. It has stayed ever since. But I did end up doing more ayahuasca. That surprised me. But here's the deal. So I'm in the abiding awakening. And at that point, the bliss of that was just so off the charts, amazing compared to anything I'd ever known. I honestly wondered, did I just hit the whole thing? Did I just go all the way to ultimate awakening? Because this ecstasy I just can't imagine it ever getting better than this. And I wasn't sure, but as it turns out, as I continued my work, especially with plant spirit work, more awakenings came, and each one was even more amazing. I've learned that awakening is always a surprise. There's no imagining the next awakening. You can't imagine it. You can't, once you get there, you understand it experientially. There's no intellectual understanding of it. But I've learned that it's just, for me, it's an endless unfolding of deeper experiences. And my own belief is that as many as I've had, I'm still barely off the starting line compared to what's possible. So that's why my motto is it always gets better than this. So with this process of ever deepening awakening, and the awakenings don't just benefit me. I mean, yeah, I feel amazing, and I get to wake up every morning in bliss already just by being conscious. But my service capacity gets so much better. And the more I awaken, the more I have greater awareness, more capacity. Intuitively, I just sort of am inspired to know how to help people more profoundly. And that's one reason I keep drinking ayahuasca, is because I want to keep increasing my service capacity so I can help people more effectively. So I may be tangenting a bit from whatever question you asked, but the point I'm driving toward is, for me, awakening always gets better. There's no end point that I'm aware of. And narrowing back to your question, so my way there, and so I spent several decades doing intensive ego effort. I mean, in this meditation school I was at when I first started, before I left there, I was doing 2-hour techniques with like 150 steps in the inner worlds, building light bodies and, subtle structures. And I was doing the best I could. But what I've learned is that my ego can only do so much on its own. And when I relax and I let the divine do it for me, if I let the divine give me the awakening, if there's energetic work to be done, if Benjamin relaxes and becomes the vehicle for that work, but the divine's really doing it and Benjamin is just watching or just doing whatever little bit he's called to do, I have much better outcomes from that. So my learning has been the more you delegate, or let me just speak for myself, the more I delegate to my higher self and my divine allies, which are really just me in disguise, of course, the more effectively and the more quickly and the more joyfully it all gets done. So my path has been one from really intense, ego's going to do it. I got to learn and train and practice and discipline and effort. And to learn the opposite for me has become true. I just need to relax and let the divine do it for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just finished a podcast earlier today with an incredible being who was on a Kabbalah Torah like path of realization, and he's in Jerusalem, cultivating away his own realization of his true nature of who he is. But we return back to what we call in Taoism, all rivers return back to the ocean. And it's so self-evident by just your description of your own journey. However it presents itself, it has this universal sort of like realization that can be mirrored in other methods, in other practices, in other belief systems, which is so powerful because it just speaks to this universal knowing that the seeker has that can come in all forms. And, within Taoism, we look at the experience like yin and yang. One side of the mountain is yin, the other side is yang. You go up the mountain, you merge the two together and realize all things, all is one, one is all. That's that realization, that knowing, that being, the present moment, the now. And it sounds so, crystal clear from your own admission that you are experiencing something to that effect in your own journey. And I think it's really profound because there are no right or wrong ways up the mountain. There are a million ways up the mountain. And when someone dismisses someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. That's a caveat that comes with that realization. And so it's interesting that you speak on the nature of the ayahuasca expanding, and your omission of saying that it just doesn't seem to end from your own observation, your own realization. I mean, it brings it right back to, we speak on the mother, which is the Tao, all things, and an expression of that is the universe. A universe is a distorted variable of perfection that has been created by your attention, intention, light to wave to matter to particle, creating what you perceive in your reality right now. And that's being altered. And so, when you speak on this stuff, it's really resonates with me in a Taoist seeking path, a very similar sort of realization. And that's, I only speak on stuff that I'm aware of from my own teachers, as there are different facets. As you mentioned, your ayahuasca is your teacher, the Tao is mine, and then that's a monologue for me. But I also have dialogues with many of the spirits and entities that I work with that give me access to the information in a new age sort of realization. You would speak on it as the Akashic records, the halls of Amente, however you perceive it, it's the now.
Yeah, it sounds to me like we're getting to a similar experience through unique paths.
Oh yeah. And the truth is everything is contracting, expanding at the same time. We speak on it within Taoism. Everything is a bellows, and so you are everything and nothing at the same time. And the only difference is, man is not like that. Man is exhausted. Man is limited. When you realize, when you know you are not of this body, what can harm you? Nothing. Zero. Nada. And so that physical flesh, from a Taoist seeking perspective, becomes a cultivational practice to nourish this vehicle, to extend the incarnation, reincarnation, however you perceive your journey right now, to extend the length of your level up right now. And so you acquire that through this vehicle operating to its full capacity, its full potential. Your constitution is being nourished, and you do that by mastering and becoming the maestro, the master, the keeper, the creator of the 50 trillion cells that you perceive as the image that's looking back at you in the mirror, this flesh and blood. And I can sense that this is a similar sort of experience, but in your own admission, your own words. Do you have specific practices that the ayahuasca teaches you in cultivation to nourish this physical body? Do you go down that alchemical path?
Yes, and both with and without that. One thing that ayahuasca does, now that I'm in my 60s, I've noticed some initial challenges cognitively that I started to have, and on more than one occasion, ayahuasca has cleared my brain of that stuff and sharpened me up again. I've also been inspired, not always directly by ayahuasca, but just by living. Like, I go to a functional medicine doctor, I do cognitive testing, and I am on a keto diet. And, my diet, and not just keto, but really brain health optimized. So my diet is very much optimized for the optimal functioning of my body and my mind. I've experienced very dramatically. I did a recent podcast episode on my Awaken, Heal, and Thrive podcast series on when I went to this dietary change. It just radically shifted my life for the better. It was just amazing how much of a difference the diet had on my consciousness. Most days I start with hatha yoga. I mix in some qigong techniques in there as well, a little bit of Taoism on the edge. I exercise just about every day. I do both strength training and flexibility training. Physical workouts. I sit usually for an hour a day at my mesa doing my spiritual practice, keeping the energetics clean. So I spend several hours a day in the maintenance of the physical body. And, I'm always getting new insights and upgrades on how to more optimally care for that. I've learned that, however much I may know about something, there's way more I don't know yet. So I'm always open to new insights, whether they come from my own intuition or ayahuasca tells me, or I just am synchronously led to a wonderful source of information that will guide me. So I've learned, especially in my 60s, that, the maintenance of the physical body is of crucial importance, because, as you said, consciousness growth, that I think there may be a certain amount of that can only be done while physically incarnate. So I'm not so much concerned with the longevity of this lifetime. I'm much more concerned about the quality of it. I know what I am, and I know that when my physical death comes, that what I am will joyfully go on to whatever's next. So the consciousness perseveres. But while I'm here, I want Benjamin, this physical structure, to be in as good a shape as he can be. And I want him to be in great shape, not only for my own pleasure, but because Benjamin is trying to serve a lot of people while he's here. And he needs to be in tip-top shape on all levels to perform that service optimally.
You make a very good point. We always marry a nice infusion of the physical and the spiritual and the emotional, and identify that there's an integration of these things. Within Taoism, we use this very powerful incantation directly from the mouth of the Jade Emperor, one of my teachers. A power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift, that is your offering. That is your gift, that is your offering. That is your gift, that is your offering. And so that integrates this understanding, just as you just spoke on it. I felt it was very pertinent for this particular moment to be very clear that, there's this mirroring effect. We go into mirror magic, but the understanding of the bellows, the contracting, expanding that's happening right now, you're all things and nothing at the same time, that these things are very much part of the dualistic experience. Once you step past that from your own realization within attuning and returning back to your true self, the default, the selflessness, the nature of reality, which is the present moment, you're all things and nothing at the same time. Bring forth the understanding that there is this moment now, and that's all there is. And when you realize that, profound things take place. And so from the physicality perspective, we nourish the body, just as you spoke on it, it's a very large component. A lot of people think most Eastern philosophies, they call it that. Taoism is actually a religion also, that as a Taoist priest ordained in 2 lineages of Taoism, I embody all things. Just as a Taoist seeker, I teach people how to cultivate and nurture this physicality so that they can enrich themselves and return back to the truth of who they really are. That physical aspect, I take quite, literally. It's funny, my remembrance of who I am from past lives leading up to this was a very different story when you realize, oh, okay, I started out with bodybuilding and powerlifting in my early teens and then went straight into internal like cultivation and realization at the ripe old age of 20. And I've been doing that for over 32 years now. That physicality really makes a difference. I was doing things like squatting 800 pounds, deadlifting 800 pounds, doing things that were within the physical, which presented itself as limiting. And it was like driving down the highway at 100 miles an hour, the hubcaps were coming off. And so to represent that at a young age, what I consider a very young age, that showed me that I still needed to attune myself to something greater, to realize that when you remind the man who's never left the village, remind him that he has seen the world, it happens right here. That's where you get it all. That's where it's all found. And everything you speak on today is so profound, in my opinion. You're just bringing a remembrance to the seeker that finds your incredible insight and messaging, and being able to share that with them, and incorporating this integration of mental, emotional, physical, spiritual awakening. And so you speak on the physical, you do resistance training and some qigong, some other things. How do you find that? Do you use alternative conditioning, like maybe kettlebells or things of that nature? What do you use?
My physical workout evolves, but a typical sequence would be one day I'll go ride my bike. I live in a hilly area, so it's a good workout going up and down those hills. I might do like a 45-minute bike ride. Another day I might go to the gym. One day I'll hit the machines and I'll do lower body strength training. The next time I go, I'll do upper body strength training, a little bit of aerobics on the front end. I also do high intensity interval training just at home on a mat, and I do the 45 seconds of the intense exercise and 20 seconds of rest, and then the next bit. So that's a very high intensity workout. And in addition, just on top of all that, most mornings I do 30 to 45 minutes of just very slow, gentle yoga stretching. My body tends to be a bit tight, and so the stretching really helps not just my body be more loose and limber, but I can feel the stuck pockets of energy getting released and cleared by the asanas that I do as well. And also, usually after the workout, I come home and I either take a hot bath for 20 or 30 minutes with Epsom salts and sea salt, or I go in the infrared sauna, and either way, whether it's the bath or the sauna, there's a relaxation, there's a purging of any heavy stuff that wants to be released after the workout, and that's all becomes part of the process.
Yeah, it's amazing how integrate. We have specific practices for yin and yang exposure, and that's quite interesting, the timing of things. I don't really spend more than anywhere between 2 and 4 minutes 3 times a week doing resistance, or what we call hypertrophy. It's a high intensity, however you put it. It all comes down to the alchemical response. Someone who has questionable mental emotional states should not be applying physical activity to an already stressed nervous system. It becomes problematic because you start to expend your Qing, your life force. And so the more you become emotional, the more you are spent. It's like people are like, well, I'm not an energy person. I don't cultivate energy. You don't have to. Wherever your attention, intention goes, your energy flows. That means that you could be an accountant, you could be a janitor, you could be a football player, you could be the Dalai Lama. Your attention, intention is siphoning your very essence, which I find is something that a lot of people are not familiar with. Yet I get them all the time. People come to me all over the spectrum. Functional medicine doctors, medical doctors, Chinese medicine doctors, massage therapists, acupuncturists, alternative healers, Reiki masters, whatever you call it. And they're all like, I'm tired, I'm spent. Well, that's the first red flag. You've had a long day. You need to identify that you are siphoning your life force. You must be able to, as you mentioned it, the container must be optimized, and you saturate that. So from a Taoist perspective, you will saturate it, the cells, the 50 trillion cells that you possess, with a 0.07 millivolts of electricity. Activate that, realize you can move it any way you want, and take your battery level, your constitution, from, I've never seen anyone enter this world at 100%, but I always use the analogy of the battery as the life force. So we call it Qing. So the Qing is what you enter the world with. And normally most people are at 80%, 80, 90%, meaning your hereditary genetic expression of who you are in the flesh is a baseline of what you're going to start with. Then you level up through the cultivational practices, take it up to 100%, then go from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 9,000 being the highest point within a Taoist path is the highest number, the most powerful number. And that reflects on many different things. Yet people, and I want to ask you, having done this for so long, a lot of people, most people cannot, they're kind of like, well, I feel the energy. It's like, I know it's energy. I'm like, well, actually, there are gradients of different profiles of energetics across the spectrum. And if you can't see that with a clear sense, then you could literally be sitting in a dark room, what you think you're playing with putty, and it's actually dog shit. So people need to understand what it is that they're working with or cultivating. I wouldn't say that's the not appropriate word, working, cultivating, that it is optimizing themselves and the individuals or group that they're sharing this knowledge with. Have you noticed this yourself through your own journey and teachings?
Yes. I get more and more aware of the subtle energy, both in myself and in my clients. These days, if I work either with an individual or with a group, with an individual, I can feel empathically in me what's happening in them. That's how I can track them, because it's mirroring in my own body what's happening in theirs. So I'm very clear with what they're going through. If I'm leading a group process, like in my Awakening Plus membership, I can feel the overall vibe of the group, not only the people on the live call, but those who will be accessing the recording afterward. I feel kind of the gestalt of all that and lead in response to what I perceive happening in the group field. And in terms of my own awakenings, I have my sixth sense, if you want to call it that, has been turned on for years. It's just a natural, sometimes I think it's my strongest sense, even bigger than the other five now. And there's just a constant awareness of that other dimension of reality, which doesn't lend itself to language really well. But I feel it, like even right now I'm perceiving it, and I'm constantly tuned into that. And if I feel any disruption in that force, so to speak, then I need to make adjustments to get that energy more strong and clear. I definitely still hit my old traumas, whether from this life or past life. And if I notice my own field being disturbed, then I do my own healing processes on that, whether it's my healing invocation. I've also trained in internal family systems therapy, which says you have one self in many parts, little subpersonalities. And I find that an extremely helpful approach to dealing with any part of me that's resisting. I can, as the awakened self, I can go work with the traumatized part, unburden it, reintegrate it, and do that for myself and my clients as well. So I find, one of my core concepts that I talk about in my book is the great onion of consciousness. And the idea is at the core, you are already profoundly awakened, more than your human could ever probably experience. And around this beautiful awakened onion is these old dark layers of like dark onion layers. And these are the old traumas you haven't healed yet from this life or your past lives. And so my premise is, for most people, the fastest road to awakening is good shadow work. If you can get to that layer, which you don't have to go look, it'll show itself in your life. Something will happen, it'll get triggered when it's time. And then if you have a quick, effective modality, which the best ones I'm aware of for myself are doing a healing invocation, ask the higher self to heal it for you while you just watch, or a more active form such as internal family systems therapy, those can take very rapidly. I mean, I've seen clients in 30 or 45 minutes fully and finally heal a trauma that they'd sat with their whole life. So I've also learned that healing can be very quick and effective. It doesn't have to take forever. So by facing and healing the traumas, then you can, really accelerate the awakening process and have a much more joyful life and increase your service capacity for others.
Yeah. I mean, there's 9 stages for a Taoist cultivator.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with the physical body, the energetic body, the spiritual body. Then it leans into the sun body, the earth body, the moon body. And then it wraps up with the oneness body, the ultimate body, and then being with all things. And so that highest level, I would put in the category of the physical, an access of conscious and unconscious process. So that would be sort of like the first realization of the human's journey of something greater, is that entry level. Do you use some type of like a splicing of conscious and unconscious? Are you integrating a base level of sort of hypnosis at that point to integrate into an unconscious process to reveal something that's within as you mentioned, trauma-based sort of path? Because, I mean, this is sort of like where people get caught up in this. Yeah. From a Taoist, we always go, hey, look, you've got your personality. It's given to you for a reason. Enjoy it. But realize that your emotions don't control you. You control your emotions. And people are like, what? Yeah. And so when you master that, you can move it like icons on a computer screen. And so you can engage in something, realize it, shut it right down from the thought, the feeling, and emotion, which are the 3 ingredients of all things that create your reality. And you can have the thought and diffuse the emotion and the feeling and make it nothing more than wisdom, and you can recall it at will. Most people tend to get the emotion and the feeling, which is a very mood point for a lot of people. Like, that's 2 of the same. Actually, no, they're quite separate. And when you get down to the splicing of that very moment, you can see the energetic profile and the separation of those 2 components. When that takes place, the wisdom is something you can reflect on and enrich your humanistic journey. So the trauma, when you mention that, would be in the category of the physical body that we start out with. And I imagine you have a practices, as you said, evoking an incantation or something of that nature that takes that person out within a few minutes, from which you're on a mission, 40 minutes or something. That's quite profound. I think that, with everything, when people realize the present moment is now, healing is now. And so if there's a prolonged sort of like residual trail of that effect, it can be from the seeker's perception, perhaps. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, you've put a lot on the table there. Let me
I tend to have just yeah.
No, I hear you. But let me tell you how I approach it. My current approach is the trauma can be healed without understanding it.
Yeah.
I think the trauma is physical and it's also very much emotional. Trauma is usually old, locked emotions that have got stuck in the body, and then the body can have all sorts of problems over the years as that stuck emotion stays stuck and not healed. So when I do trauma healing, the first thing I do is get my client into embodied awakening. And that's 8 words. You say to your higher self, maximum embodied awakening that serves highest good, please. You literally just relax and let it come in. And for most people, even if they've ever meditated before, they can get into that state very quickly, in a minute or 2 usually. And I can track them and make sure, okay, and I check, okay, is all this true? No mental chatter, no challenging emotion, peaceful, effortless? And most people, yeah, that's it. Okay, that's at least baseline awakening. You can work from there. And the more awakened you are as you go through the shadow work process, the more quick and effective it's going to be. So then, depending on the modality, If I can do it with the healing invocation, that is the quickest and easiest approach, if that works. So what I tell the person then is, okay, feel in your body, where is the discomfort? All you have to know is something here does not feel good. It could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be both, but just become aware of any disharmony anywhere in your field. Just feel it, notice where it is. And then I say, rank it 1 to 10. If it's a 0, I'm sorry, 0 to 10. If 0, I've got no discomfort at all. 10 is like it's just almost too much, really intense. So give it a number. And then I tell them, okay, also, you don't have to know anything about it. No mental understanding is needed at all to do this healing. And then I say, okay, let's put your higher self to work on it. I got them to say maximum healing that serves highest good, please. That's calling the higher self in to do the healing for them. And then I say, okay, your job now that you've called in your higher self is simply to keep feeling the discomfort and just holding awareness there. Feel it all the way. Don't filter it. Feel it all the way. The nature of this process is overwhelms actually not possible. The higher self only brings up as much as the person can manage. It may be intense, but it won't be too much. And then they feel while the higher self gets in there, kind of stirs it up, loosens it up. And normally the heavy energy flushes out the hands or feet. It can leave other ways too. Once in a while, the higher self will just transmute it to love and light right where it is and make it good energy. But we don't micromanage the higher self. We just let it do it at once. And of course, I'm there tracking them and seeing how it works. And after that flushing is all done, one other nuance is, and I tell them, okay, as we're doing this, thoughts or images may arise, and those are welcome in the field. Just don't focus on them. Let them be in the background. The more you hold your attention on simply feeling, the quicker it's going to flush out. And then once the flushing or transmutation is done, we can feel, okay, the wave is over. Then I say, okay, 0 to 10, how intense is it now? And in most cases, they say, wow, it's 0. There's nothing left. And at that point, I say, okay, all right, so and often if there's several variations on this healing invocation that are described in my book, Instant Divine Assistance. And I say, okay, there's 2 possibilities here. If you now think back on, either you don't feel it now, or if we initiated this process by calling up an old trauma, you deliberately called it the memory of something that's always disturbed you and stirred it up that way. And if after that healing process, you bring the mental image back and there's no emotional discomfort from it, you're neutral to it, I say that either means you just completely healed it, all done, or we healed everything that was currently available. And there may be more in the unconscious that may come up later. And if so, that's not a problem, because just do another healing round and have your higher self flush up whatever's next. And then I explain to them about the Great Onion and say, every time you do one of these good pieces of shadow work, you'll awaken. And the cool thing is, during this healing invocation process, they'll notice that at first they just feel the icky energy being taken care of, but then this nice energy starts creeping in around the edges. And after a while, the nice energy outweighs the uncomfortable energy. And usually by the end of the process, there's no trace of the heavy energy left. And they're saying, oh my God, I'm in bliss. I feel great. And they've literally had an awakening. Because again, with the Great Onion image, another layer got peeled. The light from source is more easily received by the personality. And you're a notch up on the awakening scale then, if you want to call it that. So that's when I work with the healing invocation process, that's kind of how that works. If I'm doing internal family systems therapy, that's a little more involved. And that's a very, multi-step process where I guide them to the traumatized part that got cut off and, get its trauma off it, bring it back into the inner family. It's basically shamanic soul retrieval dressed up as psychology, in my opinion, is what IFS really is. But that's, sometimes that is the most effective way to get in there. It usually takes a little longer than a healing round of using the healing invocation. But those are my 2 foundational tools for helping clients heal trauma. And either one will, and sometimes these days, I'm an Aquarian and I can't ever do anything, just buy the book. So sometimes I'll be doing internal family systems therapy, and we'll bring in some invocations in part of the process, or whatever spirit guides we can, mix and match things to make it all work properly. So in summary, I've given you kind of a granular look at how this works for me when I facilitate it. But again, whatever we're doing, to the greatest extent possible, we let spirit do it for us. And even if IFS, I'm having the client function as their awakened self. And so even as they're interacting with it, they're not just coming from their personality. They're coming as much as possible from their awakened self, which sort of just intuitively knows what to do anyway. So I hope that's at least somewhat clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really get into the semantics of whether mommy gave me 5 cookies when I was 5. That type of stuff doesn't really go into the infrastructure. You reference shadow work. Within Taoism, everything is yin and yang. There isn't a good or an evil.
Right.
Everything is just very much those two energies within a dualistic perception of reality until otherwise noted. You will be subject to that. And moreover, you will be distorted, as my dear friend Martin, the Buddhist monk, would say. The dukkha will change your lens quite dramatically as to how you perceive your reality.
Yeah.
And so the baseline of all things when it comes to Taoist seeker is to first master your emotions. And that's kind of like the Harry Potter entry level. First thing that happens. And normally that takes, the individual can take a second, but I generally take people through a processes where you're dialing in the energetic centers. From a Taoist, there's 9 from the earth to the universe. And then as you acquire a higher level of ascension, we normally go up to about 108. But I mean, that's, crazy time. Someone can hit 27 and be like a levitating guru doing instant physical healings and all that kind of crazy stuff. You start with 9. Normally it takes the average person about, for me personally, I give them a program and it takes them about 9 weeks. But they'll come to that realization because each week they're resetting and synchronizing their energy centers, which makes them completely clear. And by the end of it, they master their emotions. And if they just never do another thing, they have this integrated neurological pathway that they can access at will. I always tell people the second they start any sort of training, they need to be able to measure this stuff. So for me, I tell them, you've done one 27-minute experience of creating this energetic potential. Now go out and create conflict. No, I'm just kidding. But they do want to understand whether this is real world battle tested stuff, not something where we sing kumbaya and get in the corner of the room and get all elated and blissful. And then when they have to apply it to what they perceive as their reality, you're moot out of luck, as they would put it, shit out of luck, because you're changing gears in your consciousness. And so for me, I have people measure their path on a daily basis, having them being able to realize they can instantly access this state and alter it at will, like an icon on a computer screen. When you feel this, if you can eradicate that emotional content inside of a second or two, you're just working on it, because it's a distraction, it's a distortion, it's not reality. It's part of the human experience, but the human experience is limiting you to the fact that you are this physical flesh. So stepping past that, you want to obtain high levels of consciousness, you must identify that the human condition is not reality. It's an anchor to your perception of what is perceived as. But if you're raising 2-dimensional shifts that are beyond this 3D, you have to realize you're all things. You're not just the physical body. And so that kind of nurturing effect can be quite clear. I normally give them an exercise and they can measure it. They go like, you get accountants going, how the hell? This is tax season and I feel as high as a kite. I'm doing this stuff with my eyes closed and I don't really care. I'm like, I have no sense of this anxiety and stress and resistance and anger that comes with this moment in time, because it's changed. It sounds to me like you're using your own techniques to acquire a very similar response within the people that are following your methodology, your methods, your enlightenment, your awakening of their returning to their true self, which is really profound. Because, as I said before, there is no right or wrong way up the mountain. There is just a million ways to acquire that state. And it sounds very much a beautiful, well, repeatable. I like repeatable. It's like, well, you know, within this industry, I get a lot of people that are like, oh, I had a glimpse. And it's like, oh, yeah, okay. That's like chasing the spiritual dragon. You got a hit, and now you're forever spending the rest of your natural born life looking for it again. I saw an apparition. I had a prediction. I could see ghosts. I could hear voices. And then they had it once, and then it's gone. Within Taoism, we cultivate that. So your senses become equal. You start with 5, and then I go, okay, you got 5 senses. And they're like, yeah, okay. I can say hello, and you can hear it in your mind, say it in your mind, and speak it in your mind. There's 3 more. There you go. You've got 8 now. So now what are we going to do with that? You have 8 senses, and it's quite limited to your imagination. And they're like, what? Sensory perception is nothing more than your ability to attune to those energetic potentials and then make them tangible, palpable, so they're repeatable. And as a human, they're going to look for what we call, a psychologist might perceive it as a heteroaction. What you start, you must finish. This idea that humans are like in this sort of little rat in a wheel processes from a psychology perspective. And that need, that desire to complete something they've started is a seed of curiosity, quite frankly. And then you expand from that. So, the senses are, any clear sense you got, quite frankly, you could have 1 million senses. It's all transferable into what I teach people: mediumship, channeling, healing, clairvoyance, whatever you want to call it. I've got 6 children of my own. 5 of them are already trained in, hypnosis, remote viewing, energetic healing, this type of stuff, as they should be. The eldest one is 12, and the youngest is like 6 months. Give him another 6 months, and he'll be waving his little finger around doing physical healings or whatever. But, it's such an incredible entry point, because what you're speaking of can have foundations in just that seed of, through the own admission of the discovery of the human flesh being more than just a cell, getting right down to that DNA code that was discovered back in the 60s, more reflection of that as the scientific community validating what you and I, my friend, have known for many lifetimes before this. And within Taoist practices for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, people like, you can't throw those kind of numbers out. There's no validation. I can tell you, when I say it and it resonates with you, you know it's true. Forget about what's book learned or what someone may have been able to validate. I had a historian on the channel who actually has documentation leading back to the origins of humanity and the human being as being at least 1 million years old on paper that he can find. So it's like, come on now. We need to stop with this psyop to separate you from your true nature, which is the present moment, which seems to be this reoccurring theme. And that's why someone like yourself is so powerful in this day and age, and how people have evolved, and you've, through your own admission, through your own training over many decades, have come to that realization, and you've been able to cultivate these incredible skills and insights to help others find themselves also. And it's like, there is definitely a movement for conscious collective. And, from the aspect of the Schumann resonance, meaning the heartbeat of the earth, and what resonates from the earth is the 7.87 hertz, which roughly puts you in a theta brainwave thereabouts, which means that you're a highly pliable, badass mofo that can alter anything at will. If you stand here and absorb the circadian rhythm of the earth, and you attune yourself to pace and lead within that algorithm, you will be able to stay there. Only the problem is human condition, right? So you get up in the morning, you slice off some serotonin, boom, next minute you're in beta, high beta, add some coffee, add some stress, add some personality, and you're shit out of luck. You're having a bad day. And then
Mhm.
you add to that resonance, right? And I've noticed there's this weird sort of like artificial manipulation of that current resonance, which is the 7.87, which should just keep you there. The world should be in this kumbaya, my lord, type of state, but that's not what's going on. They're pushing it up around 12 to 18 hertz. I actually had a couple of readers of Schumann resonance on the channel, and they were noticing this very profile of an artificial uptick of this. So 12 to 18 hertz is a beta, high anxiety, high stress is what's being present in today's society. Yet even furthermore, you get into people like yourself, myself, that are sharing this spiritual consciousness and bringing people into this hurt frequency that is 100% consciousness. When you hit the gamma brainwave, you are 100% conscious. That means that you can access your conscious and unconscious at will as the same, as one, meaning you can alter all the stuff that you mentioned, erasing PTSDs, problems, issues. They're all gone, which is so profound to hear, because more people need to be able to access this stuff, or being taught how to access this stuff from your invocations, all the things that you teach people from a much deeper level of this spiritual awakening, because that's really, in my opinion, how that's the beginning and end of all things. Physical ailments, quite frankly, are the end result of years of misery that have transmuted into that. And that's sort of like a fun foundational thing from a Chinese medicine perspective, which is basically created from a Taoist path, which was, on paper 6,000 years ago. The Yellow Emperor, one of my teachers, created the infrastructure of Chinese culture today, being magnetized to the earth for 18 days and nights, being downloaded from the whispers of the universe. All things within the culture included Chinese medicine, Qigong, Nigong, internal alchemy, all these types of things. And it refers to, and I'm just referencing this because you shared this before, this whole trapping of this emotional content into the fascia, into the flesh, and it transmutes from the organs into a distortion, a dukkha. And if you heal it, if you go and you find Benjamin, and he gives you the shamanic woo-woo, as you put it. I call it that. It's funny, one of my dear friends, Julie from Ask Julie Ryan, she would always use the word woo-woo. I do the woo-woo, and she's a healer also. She gets in there and tinkers with the DNA and does all this stuff. But when I mentioned woo-gee, she was like, oh, is that my woo-woo? I'm like, yeah, that's your woo-woo. That's the stillness, right? From a Taoist perspective, we call it the stillness between the breath in and the breath out, the wu-ji. And that accesses the mother of all things, the Tao. And that's that versica, the center point of all things, which is the now. And so, my goodness, that just the insight, and you gathered this from self-exploration and just guiding from intuition, your intuitive self, to gain these sort of like realizations. Because really, I personally believe Taoism is like a Gnostic path, very similar to this sort of like esoteric, mystical realization, that self-evident realization of all things. And it sounds to me like you've acquired that through your own journey.
I've done my best. I'm sure there's much more I don't know than I do, but I feel like I have learned enough to be helpful for myself and others who are drawn to work with me. The one thing that I like about the way my path is turned, pretty much of its own accord, is into the absolute simplest way that gets it done. I like that the invocations are about as simple a way as I've ever found or heard of to move into embodied awakening, to get your higher self working on the healing you might need. And so that's kind of my theme, if you will, is how simple can we make this? How quick can we get it done with the least effort, with the least muss and fuss, and ending in you being in a more awakened place.
Right. And so, that visceral kinesthetic response that you get, it's kind of like the energetic potential is there, right? So when you feel that heat, like the heat that you and I are feeling right now, it's like you're on that precipice of perspiration because there's a lot of energy, and that just comes with just being at one with all things. How do you describe the energetic potential that you experience?
Like right now, I'm in a pretty wonderful state of calm, peacefulness, bliss, euphoria. That's pretty much the space I've been holding this whole interview. And I'm, Benjamin has just learned how to relax and let the divinity that I really am, operate through him. And that's been my goal, not just in this interview, but in life. I just do my best to stay in that flow as clearly as I can and let the Tao or the divine energy or whatever you want to call it work through me. And I'm just trying to be the best, helper I can.
Yeah. It's an amazing path to be on. And so where do you see yourself in 60 years, my dear friend?
60? Well, if I'm still incarnate. Honestly, I can't even imagine, because what I'm doing now is so much more amazing than anything I could have imagined even 5 years ago. I never would have dreamed I'd be doing what I'm doing now. And, one of the things I say to people sometimes is, how people say it doesn't get any better than this. My experience is it always gets better. And I may have touched on this earlier, but I'll rephrase it here. At the level of awakening you're at, whatever consciousness you're at, you can only conceive a certain amount. And I'm sure you've had the same experience, Sean. Son. When you have an awakening, there's a whole new experience. There's new possibilities. There's new things that can be done now that the prior you could not have done before that awakening. And because my expectation is that, even a few years from now, I should be a whole lot more awake than I am now. The capacity of what I can do at that point is almost certainly beyond anything Benjamin can comprehend. The best I can imagine now is I would like to help way more people. Instead of thousands, I'd like to help millions, if that's, serves the highest good. For those who resonate with my path, which is only one of Taoism is a wonderful, extraordinary path. Like you said, there's many ways up the mountain. And I believe the reason there are so many is because all the different souls here each of them needs a little bit different approach to get there. And I love that there's all these flavors of religion and spirituality and awakening available so people can choose the one that fits them at the moment. And so you offer a flavor, I offer a flavor, all true teachers offer a flavor of the path. And people will feel, what am I drawn to? And then I would encourage them to stay with the path that's working for them as long as it's their optimal path. One thing I say to my clients and in my book is I say, look, this is the best stuff I'm aware of to DIY, heal, and awaken yourself with these invocations. But if you already know of a better way, or you discover a better way later, please drop my tools and use those tools that work better. I'm well aware that I am oblivious to most of the paths out there. I've studied for almost 50 years on the spiritual path, but I'm sure there's way more out there than I could possibly know about as Benjamin. So use the best tools you got. And my own personal bias is use the simplest, most effective tools that get the job done. And again, my particular flavor is delegate to your higher self, your healing, your awakening, and everything else that it can do better than your ego can. And that's why my path is a path of such complete, just delegate it to your higher self, chill out, and let it do it for you, is kind of the core tool of the invocations that I teach.
Beautiful, my friend. Absolutely beautiful. And it comes in all forms,
Mm-hmm.
There is no right or wrong way.
The divine loves variety.
Right. It really does. Yeah. And so, my goodness, I think we covered a lot here today.
We have. It's been a completely unique and extraordinary interview. I'm really grateful to have been here.
Yeah, I'm very, very grateful that you've come on the podcast and shared your insight, your mastery of this very path, because everyone resonates. Everything is words, numbers, letters, symbols. It all integrates into the very fiber and essence of who you are, which makes you gravitate to something, expand to something, and contract to something else. Mm-hmm. The very infrastructure of the nature of who you are is that bellows that we speak of, and that makes it very simple. It's like, I followed my heart. I thought with my head. I got a gut feeling. These types of expressions are very much in reference to the energetic potential that you have. And the more you attune it, taking and seeking it through a lens like Benjamin's or myself, you will acquire this knowing that you're looking for. Always remind people, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. And that feeling is critical to an understanding of all things. It goes beyond the words. It goes beyond the intellect. And it makes it very simple. And I love the way you always reference that throughout this whole conversation. You wanted to make it the most simplistic, effective way to acquire a shift, a level of consciousness, a change for that individual seeker, to give them what they need to remember who they are.
Yeah.
And
and would it be okay if I mentioned just a couple of resources people can check out?
Well, absolutely. I was just about to get to, before we end this podcast, I'm going to put all your social media under this podcast. I then want all my students, my OGs, everyone using the Way 126, anyone subscribing to this channel, to go and find Benjamin on social media, through his podcast, through his website, through his teachings, and experience this very moment. The students always love me having conversation because they experience the visceral kinesthetic response that takes place within the energetic profiles of myself and the guest. And so with that, I would like to enter into the conversation what you would like to offer the audience today.
Okay. Probably the single most helpful resource is a free video. It's about an hour long. And in it, I not only describe, but lead them through all 4 of my invocation types. I've already talked about the invocation for awakening, embodied awakening, full on in the body, and for healing. There's 3 variations on that too. But there's also an invocation called the hollow reed, where you can act as a hollow reed for highest good energy for others, for their healing or awakening or whatever. And there's also where you can literally call in any flavor of energy you want on the spot. So all 4 of those techniques are taught in this free video, and I actually lead you through them in the course of it. And that's at astroshaman.com/invocations. So easy to get to. And if you want to learn more about me or my offerings or my membership, all of that is linked from the course site astroshaman.com. If you are particularly interested in my online membership, that's awakeningplus.com, awakeningplus.com. And that's probably enough. I don't overwhelm people with too many places to go.
Amazing. In closing, one last question. What is your definition of consciousness?
Consciousness is just awareness. Consciousness is that which you fundamentally are, that goes throughout eternity, in my experience and belief.
Amen to that, brother. Amen. I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Oh, it's been my great pleasure to be here, San. I'm really grateful to have been your guest.
Very, very grateful for you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Qing. And I'll see you on the next one, guys.